Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh.
The English Bible and a few other languages translated very good. Unfortunately, both in the Indonesian language and in Chinese language, it did not elaborate word more. So for those visitors, when they come here, and I explain to them what it is and show them what it is, it's like the light suddenly dawned on them. After we have every time we look at that, what he may say is not Alison. That's where Jesus and we walk into the garden, reading the footstep of the disciples, and ladies, Mary Magdalene, and Salome, they retrieve the body of the Lord and walk through the garden. So we are doing just that, and at the end of the garden, there is a tomb. Right? That tomb fits in very well in what is described in the Bible. So with that, let's go and have a look at what
is the Temple Mount. That's where Abraham left his servants behind on that mountain, put the wood of the sacrifice on the shoulder of Isaac and said, "Follow me." He took him up to the highest peak of Mount Moriah, I believe, and built an altar in stone, which was still there. The stones are still on top of the mountain today. This is a place that I've tried to get up there a couple times. I've been thrown off out of the graveyard. But Keith Johnson, who is darker skinned than I am, was able to get up there and took pictures of it. So we have Keith by that broken down altar that is still up there at this time. So we are going to, now we'll let David tell the rest of the story. And of course now you see there's a wall that's been recently built. This one, I think really within the last couple of years, that this was put here so they didn't face it. It looks as ugly as can be. I'm going to take you by where literally there earthquake cracks, you see them in this wall here. And we remember in the scripture, when Yeshua cried with a loud voice, said, "It is finished," the earthquake, the rocks rent. And the graves were opened. And when he arose, there were those in the graves who arose and appeared to many in the streets of Jerusalem. And so, you know, this area right here, you can see the fractures in the rock. They've been patched up. There are earthquake barometers on there because they want to make sure that it remains a safe place for people here. But as you can see, the place of the skull no longer looks like a place of the skull over there, but it did and has for literally 2,000 years until just recently. So that was my overview there.
excellent. Outstanding. If you refer all the way to the book of Genesis and so on, truly it's like the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's like a mirror image. One reflects to the other. Right? I know our guy
Can you talk
here.
a little louder because they don't have a device now?
No,
No,
they're not.
They're not, but,
No, but
he,
we
does
are.
have, he has a soft voice, so
Yeah, no, we are part of it.
maybe step back a little bit where they might be able to hear him.
Sorry about that because reflection, the mirror image. I'm not a Bible scholar, so I hear things like this. It's amazing. I used to tell people who say that the Bible, is a storybook. and they do not want to read it. That I think is the biggest mistake of their life. So there is a thing called the Bible Study Fellowship on St. Anthony.
Don't know for sure, but that altar up there has a thicket that is still beside it that has been there for a very, very long time. Who knows? I mean, 3,000 years is a long time. Or 4,000 years. That's 4,000 years ago, but you know, sometimes things continue to reseed themselves. But you know, for Yeshua to go from the Antonio Fortress and then to be marched out the lower gates that we saw right into the roadbed, and this is where they crucify people on, not on hills far away, but right in the roadbed, to where you're right face to face with your brother, your next door neighbor, your father, and it took up to a week to suffer and die on the cross. That's why Josephus said one time 2,000 Jews hanging on crosses along this roadbed ran out of lumber, and so here we are in a place where we know this happened. Now, another thing I wanted to point out, I mentioned before, when the Israeli government attempted to buy Jeremiah's grotto, which is down here in the side of this mountain where they keep the fresh fruits and vegetables, when they attempted to buy that, and they offered them a blank check. A blank check, you fill in the amount, and that's when Arafat got involved and he gave the money, and they built a minaret to make it a Muslim holy site at that point. And after that, the Israeli government shut down the bus station for a couple of years. They did there's some excavation right down here under a tent during that period of time, and then after that, that's when this wall was built, and then of course, well, it looks like we got barley all over right at the base of that. We'll see. But I wanted to point that out. I mentioned the minaret. That is there, and it's new. It is in the last 18 years now. Last 18 years that was built. So again, a little bit more political intrigue about this particular place, but okay, thank you, David. Now we're going to do a There's something very significant, many things significant about this place that lets us know that this is the location. The one in the Psalm, it says he makes his grave among the rich and among the wicked. And what you don't see here is right on the other side of that wall is the richest caverns and burial place in the land of Israel. And I've been in it. The Knights Templar own it, and the son of the head of the Knights Templar in America is a friend of mine. And about 15 years ago, we got in there, and so it's very obvious. They have where they've laid the bodies. They have the hair of Hathor, the Egyptian sun goddess, and so they put the body in this pagan position right there until the flesh decays, and then all the bones are gathered into these pits. I've literally held, reached in and just picked up skulls and just deep pits of this. So among the rich and wicked, you wouldn't see it from here because it's owned by another church, but it's right on the other side of that wall. Now, there was something that people were projecting and thinking that a piece of shrapnel from the 1967 war was embedded in this wall. That's why I took you to Zion Gate, because when bullets hit a wall, it just splatters it. But this is what was done just a few years ago. The Department of Antiquities said, no, this is not something modern. You have to have a permit. It took 3 years to get the permit to take a sampling of this piece of metal right here. They used a subsurface radar to measure the depth of this and exactly how far in it went, and so they were allowed to take one sample of it. And so they started with a bit that was long enough, a core sampling bit in the upper corner, and went all the way through. Took a sampling. It was then taken to Hebrew University and to the chemistry department, and they said, this is this is iron that was embedded in molten lead. They said, this is Roman. This is exactly how they built the Colosseum. In Rome, they chiseled through the stones on each side, they poured in molten lead, and they slammed an iron spike in it, and it held it. Now, why would you have...
Excuse me, can I take a group?
Oh, sure, yeah,
Okay.
it's all yours.
Okay, thank you.
So what happened? Now remember that Yeshua is in the grave, and first of all, we're going to step back just a minute. The women were sitting across from the grave when Joseph of Arimathea wrapped the body in a linen cloth and laid it in the tomb and rolled the stone over. Now, we don't know how many people were there to help him roll the stone over, but he's a wealthy man. He doesn't do anything by himself. And he has much as the notoriety to go in before the governor of the state and to ask for the body and for him to be given the body. Okay? The women see that. He rolls the stone over and leaves. And so they go away. They leave at that point. They do not know that Nicodemus comes with Yosef and has 100-pound weight of aloes and all the burial spices in which they properly embalm Yeshua and then roll it over there. At the same time, the chief priests go to the governor and say he said he's going to rise from the dead. Well, we need to make sure that no one steals the body. And he said, go make it as sure as you can. So the Romans came and sealed the stone. How did they do it? They chiseled through, they poured molten lead and put a spike in it. That's why it took an angel to roll the stone back, and it sheared off the pin, and it remains in the wall today. And this is something we didn't know 10 years ago. And now it's all there telling the same story. So as you take a look at the trough here, and the size of the stone, you see the outline of the stone, because you would chisel it away, you would have the stone separated, and then be able to roll it back and forth in this particular area. And when General Gordon bought this and they started excavating down, they found that hole, and they actually broke open the wall right there. And so it had to be, they had to put the stone back in to support it, but all they had to do is go down a little bit further, and then they would see the original entrance in. As you go inside, you're going to be in the weeping chamber, the funeral home, the weeping chamber there. And remember, it was then, as it is now, that the day you died, you were in the grave. Same thing in Israel today. You die that day, you are in the grave before sunset. And you'll see in the left-hand chamber, there are two places for bodies to be laid. This was only used one time, because when the person died, then what they did is they went in. It takes 10 minutes to be able to chisel it out to make it long enough for the body, and then they put the body in. Only one side was ever used in this, and it was never used again. So that, along with all the other things about this garden and the location to the place of the skull, lets us know that this makes more sense than anything else out there. So as soon as they're through, you can go on in, take a look at it. Any questions?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you come up here and put your finger on that Roman seal, that iron spike there.
So this
But
is
watch
still the same
your
opening,
step.
Michael.
Watch your step.
So Michael, that spike would have gone through the tombstone as well as the
Right, but it has to be chiseled.
Yeah, we are just waiting for the liquids to come out first.
can't see.
The last time I was here, there was still one stone over on the side. It's hard.
You can see Adimba. Oh, sorry. The tomb is empty.
Not a table, but a stone ledge. One there and one over there.